everyone, this is Joe from Scarecrow Joe's Studio. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. And if you're new to the channel, welcome, and please consider subscribing. This is going to be another multi-segment tutorial. And in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make the skull and books sculpture out of 100% paper-mâché. In this first segment, I'm going to show you how to build your books and also what I do to create my skull. So that's coming up right now. Just a few things that I want to go over here before we actually get started on creating this sculpture. You can make this sculpture basically in any size that you want. If you wanted to make a smaller skull, then of course you would use a smaller skull armature. And if you wanted smaller books or books that are not so thick, then you can create those making them smaller, basically with any size that you wish. And you can stack them in as many books that you want. You know, I have 3. You could do 4, you could do 5, you could do as many as you want, make it as tall as you want. If you wanted a huge pile of books, then you would make a huge pile of books. You can also make them all the same size as far as the length and the width are concerned. Or you can stagger them so that they go from bigger to smaller. You can create this basically in any way that you want. This is just how I made mine. This was my first attempt at something like this, and I think it came out really well. One thing that I want to point out is this LED candlestick here that I have. When I created the hole in the top of the skull here, unfortunately, I didn't look at it from all different types of angles, and I didn't make sure that it was completely centered. So as you can see, it's a little bit off center, not a big deal, but if you're a perfectionist, you're really going to want to make sure it's nice and centered in your skull. Now, the other thing is you don't have to use a tall candlestick like this. You can also use an LED, kind of a larger size tea light, thicker with a thicker like base to it, and you could use that as well. You don't have to use the candlestick that I have. So one other thing that I attempted to do was I thought it would be really cool to have a black candle sticking out of his skull, and it does look pretty cool. However, when I turn the candlestick on, and you turn it on, this one doesn't have a battery in it, but you turn it on and in this light you can't really see that it's on, but it is. But you turn it on from the base here, you just unscrew it, or you screw it in tighter, and that's what turns this particular candlestick on. When I turn this one on, you could barely see any kind of a glow at all from the candle. So this one ended up working out better than painting it solid black. Now, they do sell some, I'm sure, that are a solid black color that will glow more brightly. I didn't have one, so I attempted to paint it. It didn't work out. So I just, I ended up just using a regular one with this opaque kind of a white, and that looks fine as well. So I'll show you the other 2 types of candles. This is just a regular little tea light. It's an LED, obviously, LED tea light. You can use that instead of the candlestick, or you can use a bigger LED tea light, or it's taller anyway, and you can use that. They make these things in all kinds of different sizes, so you could pick your size and use that for the top of your skull. Or you can just leave that completely off. You don't need to insert a candle in there at all. I just thought it was pretty cool to insert one in there, and I really like the effect. Well, let me go over a few materials that you're going to need for this very first segment on building your books and your skull armature. You're going to need some thicker corrugated cardboard, any kind of a packing mailing box, or any kind of a thicker corrugated cardboard will work. You're also going to need some thin flexible cardboard, such as a cereal box. And you're going to need a blade of some sort, also a pair of scissors, and you're going to want a ruler to measure out your books. The other thing that you'll need, of course, is you're going to need a hot glue gun, and you're going to need quite a few hot glue sticks for this as we progress through and build out our books here. One thing that I always have on hand when I am using hot glue is I have a little cup of cold water, just in case I get some hot glue on my fingers. I could just dip my finger with the hot glue on it in that cup of cold water, and it saves you a lot of pain. The other thing that you're going to need is you're going to need some newspaper to crumble up, and as well as small strips, because we are going to strip mache our skull here, but we'll get to that a little bit later on in this segment. So, first things first, as you can see, I have already built out or created one of my books here. This is going to be, and I have it written there, this is the top book, and these are the sizes. It's 8 by 7. The top piece of the corrugated cardboard for the top of the book, as well as the bottom. So I have that created, and I use, as you could see, for the spine, that's where these thin flexible strips or thin flexible pieces of cardboard are going to come into play. Now, like I said, you can make these as thick as you want. This just happens to be probably, I think I did 1 inch on that, and I will put the exact measurements into the description of this video if you wanted to use my exact measurements. Again, if you wanted something bigger, then you would make your forms or your pieces of cardboard bigger. If you wanted your books, the pages of your books to be thicker, then you would make that strip of cardboard or those strips of cardboard thicker. So also, as you can see, I have already cut out, this is my censor book, and those are my measurements. Again, I will leave these measurements in the description of the video. I've already measured and cut out what's going to be the pages or represent the pages, and I've already measured and cut out the spine. You do want to leave yourself some room for overlapping. After you have glued together your books, the last part is going to be to glue on your spine, and that spine is going to wrap around. That's why you're going to use the thin flexible cardboard, because it's much easier to deal with and manipulate and try to curve than the thicker corrugated cardboard. So get your hot glue guns fired up, and we're going to be ready to go here. Right, I'm going to start working on putting together my center book. As you can see, they're not exactly square. They're a little, they're a little lopsided, a little off kilter. It doesn't matter. The reason that it doesn't matter is because at the end of it, we want them to look like old books. And we're going to clay these things over. We're going to sculpt in some details. So it doesn't really matter if you don't have perfectly straight edges. It also doesn't matter if you have the exact size of the pages or the thickness of the pages that you would want. That doesn't matter either. For my pages going in the lengthwise direction, I want to leave some room off of the edge here, because as you can see on this, that's where we're going to create our pages. We're going to clay that over, so we want room in there. We don't want them completely flush up against our top and bottom of our book or our binding here. We want them to kind of hang over a little bit. So, and the other thing that you'll need, you're going to need a marker. I always forget at least 1 or 2 things here. Again, just to go over this, my center book here is 8.5 by 7.5. For my bottom and my top pages. I use a cutout of 7 inches by 1 inch thick pieces of cardboard. You can go a little longer if you want, and of course you can go a little wider. So that's going to be the top and the bottom of my pages. This is going to be where I'll put my spine in, my curved spine. And so this right here is going to be the other side of the pages here. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by attaching what's going to be my bottom pages, or what's going to represent my bottom pages. I want to leave a little bit of room for sculpting in the pages on all of the edges here. So basically I'm going to take my marker, hopefully you could see this, I don't know if you can or not. I'm going to position my strip of cardboard here on basically where I want it. And I just draw a line right across it with my hot glue. I'm trying not to overcomplicate these instructions because it's not complicated really at all. Okay, this is my 7 inch by 1 inch piece of corrugated cardboard that I am gluing on. Let me get that out of the way. And you will have to sit here and hold this for a minute until the glue starts to set. Once that glue starts to set up and cool, I don't have to hold it any longer obviously, but for good measure I'm going to go in and I'm going to, on the outside and the inside of this strip of cardboard, I'm going to squirt in some more hot glue just so I know it's going to sit there and not fall off. Alright, so there you have it. If you can see that, that's how I've glued that on. That's going to be bottom portion of what will represent my pages. This is going to be the spine. That's why this is a little bit more flush with the end of this bottom piece of corrugated cardboard. And I've left off some room here so that I could actually sculpt in my pages. I'm going to do the same thing with the same exact measurement of my corrugated cardboard on the other side of this. And you know, I'm not really measuring. I'm just kind of eyeballing it, but I want to make sure that I have the right, so this is going to be where the spine is. So that's this one over here that I just attached is a little bit more flush, and I'm leaving the room off on the other side. So I'm basically going to do the same thing. I'm going to mark where I want to squirt my hot glue. And again, as you can see, it's not completely straight. It doesn't have to be. These are going to be some old looking books that have been sitting around, kind of falling apart maybe. Pages are disintegrating, that kind of thing. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and hold this in place. And once I'm done holding that in place, I'll squirt in some more hot glue after it starts to set and cool on both of the edges here. So these are, I've got 2 of my edges there. Back here is where my spine is going to be, and that's where these are more flush up against the very edge of the cardboard. And as you can see, there's also some room that's here. What I'm going to do is this is going to represent the pages again. So spine, pages, pages, pages. What I've noticed here is that you see how my cardboard is kind of sticking out. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to trim that a little bit. It's okay to have a little bit of overlap, but you don't want that much. I got a little too much there, so I'm just going to take my scissors, eyeballing it. Just like that. I haven't glued it in yet. I'm going to go ahead, take my marker, mark my line. And I'm going to squirt in some hot glue on this edge and on that edge, and then my line. And I'm going to go ahead and attach. Wait for that to set up and cool, and again I'll go in with my glue, the inside and the outside, as well as right around this edge where they're connected. Alright, once I've done that, it's time to attach the other portion of your corrugated cardboard, which represents your top or your bottom of your book here. Right now they're about the same. And so just squirting in some hot glue all the way around my edges of these pieces of cardboard. And I'm going to go ahead and just sit that on top. Kind of lightly. I'm not really pressing it down, because I want to kind of, and you probably can't see that, but this is going to represent where my spine is going to be. These are my pages. So you want to kind of eyeball it and make sure they're about, you're going to leave yourself some room so you can build up clay on all of your edges here where your pages are going to be. Again, does not have to be perfectly flush, doesn't have to be perfectly even. And then for good measure, I'm going to go around the edge on the outside. I obviously can't get the edge on the inside. And I'm going to squirt in some hot glue where I just attached that other piece of cardboard. Alright, so all of that is glued into place. The only thing left to do is to attach our spine. Before we do that, because we have this hollow void in there now, we don't want to leave it like that. So what I like to do is I take maybe quarter sheets of newspaper, crumble it up, and I'm going to shove some newspaper in there. The reason I'm doing this is because it will provide a little bit more structure instead of it just being a hollow shape. Because once we go in and start applying our clay over this, because the clay is wet, obviously, and if you have a hollow center, applying clay over that can cause it to collapse a little bit, especially in the center. So this is going to help, again, provide some more internal structure, which will help this from avoid collapsing. That's probably enough. You do want to make sure that you get it all the way in there though. So I just use my ruler, and as you can see, I can get some more newspaper in there. You do want to make sure you fill it. All right. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is attach our spine. The length of my thin flexible cardboard, which is going to represent my spine, is the exact same length as my corrugated cardboard pieces, top and bottom. So what we need to do is manipulate this a little bit by just sort of bending it. You can use your fingers, really, really easy, just using your hands and your fingers to kind of create that rounded shape, which will represent the spine of our book. So basically just like that, leave yourself enough length so that you can squirt some hot glue on the top and then on the bottom as well. So I've got my shape ready. I'm going to go ahead with my hot glue. Get a good amount of hot glue on there. I'm going to do one edge at a time. Making sure that I still have enough room to fold it over on the other side. And of course you're going to have to hold this down in place while it cools. Alright, so that's set up and cooled and attached. I'm going to come over the other side here and do the exact same thing. Squirt in some of my hot glue. Roll this over. Gonna have to hold it in place till it cools, and as you can see I got hot glue on my fingers. My hot glue gun isn't, it's on the low temp and it's not scorching hot, but if it had been scorching hot, that's where my cup of cold water would have come into play. Alright, so that's all glued on there. So now basically here's my second book. Now, I do have some areas where it's not completely covered. To remedy that situation, I'm just going to use some masking tape. And I'm just going to use my masking tape and block in that area where there isn't any cardboard. Because we don't want just open areas once we start applying our clay. I'm going to do the other side the same way. A little piece of masking tape. Just to kind of cover in that opening there. Now at this point I have my center book and then I have my top book completed. I'm going to go ahead off camera and construct my bottom book, which is going to be slightly bigger than my center book, which the center book is slightly bigger than my top book. I'm going to go ahead and construct my last book off camera. I showed you how to put together these pieces, and I don't believe that you need to watch me do it all over again, because you can rewind that section if you want and look at it again. One thing that I will mention is that you do have an option of strip macheing these books. You know, you could do one or two, 1, 2, 3 layers of the strip mache over your cardboard if you really wanted to do that. I don't believe that's necessary, and one of the reasons is because the majority of this, with the exception of the spine, is made with some pretty thick corrugated cardboard, and then we have filled the hollow portion of the inside of this book with newspaper. So I feel pretty confident that you could go ahead at this point and just, once you're done constructing all of your books, you could start claying over. But we'll get to that part in a bit. One thing I do caution is you see these edges with the corrugated cardboard. Once you start putting your clay over that, it could be a little bit difficult, because it's going to sink into those holes. You may want to, again, take some masking tape and basically just cover over those edges. Just like that, and that's what I would do. I'm going to go ahead and cover all my edges, and then I'm not going to worry about strip macheing these. I'm just going to apply the clay right over. But we'll get to that in just a little bit. Alright, so as you can see, I have completed gluing together my books here, my center book, and the book that's going to be on the bottom of this sculpture. So I did that. The top book I had created prior to starting this tutorial, just so that I could have something to show you. But as you can see, I did go ahead and I blocked in for each of these books that little gap that was right there in between the spine and where the pages would be. I blocked that in because there was a gap or an opening, so I blocked that in with some masking tape. I also put masking tape along the edges here. Now, if you intend on strip macheing your books, even if it's just 1 or 2 layers, you wouldn't have to put the masking tape over your edges, because the strip mache would block off any of that weird looking corrugated cut cardboard. Because I'm going to skip that step and not strip mache these books, I went ahead and I used masking tape to cover those edges. It's going to be a lot easier to sculpt in or lay in my clay and smooth that over, blocking all those edges in and not showing that corrugated cardboard. Alright, so we're at the point where we're going to move on here, and I'm going to show you how to construct, or how I construct, my skull. Alright, the process that I use to create this skull, and if you've probably noticed, this is a skull that does not have the lower jaw attached to it, and I'm going to show you how to do that. But the process that I used to create this skull is by using a very, very simple mold. This is a plastic, cheap, very plastic skull. I don't know, that I've had for a very long time. It used to be connected. You can see it has a hole here. And it used to have a hook up here, which I took the hook off. But it used to connect to a plastic whole skeleton. And I find this to be very, very useful. So I actually use this mold here to create my paper-mâché skulls, a lot of them. It's the same mold that I used to create this one, the half skull. And it's also the same mold, the same process that I'm going to show you on how I created my pirate skulls. So here's another example of using that same skull, the same exact one. And you can use it over and over again. Here's another example of a pirate skull. This one doesn't have the eye patch yet. And by the way, if you're interested in learning how to make pirate skulls, I do have a separate tutorial, multi-segment tutorial on how to make those. If I remember, I'll share those with you in either the comment section, or I'll link them up at the top of these videos. But going back to this project here, this sculpture, this is an extremely, extremely simple process. There are many other ways that you could create this without even using a mold at all and creating a paper-mâché skull. You could, in fact, purchase a foam skull of the size that you would like, and you can actually even strip mache that foam skull and then clay over it to build out more features, more depth, so on and so forth, and use that instead of the process that I'm going to show you. But when you have a mold, such as something like this, something very, very simple, you can use this hundreds of times, probably thousands of times, and I've used it so many times that you can actually see where I've begun in certain places where I'm probably going to end up having to find another plastic skull at some point because I've accidentally cut through the plastic while removing my strip mache from it. But this is probably the most economical because, like I said, you can create many, many, many different skulls off of just a simple plastic skull. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now. Alright, tools and materials that you're going to need for this little portion of this tutorial on how to make a paper-mâché skull using the plastic skull mold is, of course, the skull. You're going to need some paper-mâché paste. This is a simple mixture of water and flour. And you're going to need a little bowl of water, just plain water. You're also going to need some newspaper strips, and you're going to want to cut those down maybe to 1 inch. You don't want them giant long strips. You don't want them very thick because we're going to be laying those strips onto this skull here. And lastly, you're going to need some kind of a container. So after you are done completely strip macheing your skull, to set your skull on and allow it to dry with some airflow in between. So when it sits like this, or even like this, I would suggest sitting it like this. It has more airflow. There's only going to be contact points to just couple of different areas on the skull. You put that in front of a fan and it's going to dry very, very quickly, probably within 24 hours or so. Not a big deal. You know, one other thing that you may want is a piece of plastic, or you can cut like a trash bag, kitchen trash bag in half, just to protect your table surface. I like to do that because strip macheing with paste and water and all that other kind of stuff gets really goopy, and it's just much easier to deal with it when it's on a piece of plastic that you could either let it all dry afterwards and then reuse it, or just crumble it up and discard it, you know, after you're done. But the first thing that I do, and you probably were wondering, why the bowl of water? Well, you need some kind of layer, and it only needs to be one layer, and I'm starting to dip several of my newspaper strips and letting them kind of soak in a little bit. It doesn't have to be anything dramatic, but I want to get them saturated and soaked in with the water a little bit here. And first off, by doing this and applying a layer of the strip mache simply soaked in the water, it's going to provide a barrier between the strip mache that I'm going to use with the flour and water mixture. I don't use any glue, sorry, with my paste. And so when I layer it on when I layer those strips on soaked in the paste, when I go to remove this from this mold, this plastic mold, I have found that it releases a lot easier than if I had skipped that and just went straight on and strip mached the entire thing using the paste. So I hope that makes sense. It is something that has worked for me. I've tried it many, many different times. It's worked for me. I find that it works great. Just get to a point and just start layering. You only need one layer of the newspaper strips dipped in the water. You don't need multiple layers. You just need one. Just one of the water saturated newspaper strips. So I'm going to continue on and layer on these strips, and then I'll get back to actually putting on the newspaper strips with the paste. The other advantage of putting down a piece of plastic, or like a plastic like kitchen trash bag or something like that, is that you can totally not worry about this sticking to your table, adhering to the table. So that's another advantage of that, is and in addition to keeping your table a little bit cleaner. So as you can see, I got all the way around here. I did the bottom, only one layer, and this is the only layer that just has water on it. When I get to these other little sections where there's more protrusion of like the bone or the skeletal skull bone, I'll even cut those into pieces so that they kind of form and fit a little bit better. And you know, you can't rush this. I know it's boring, trust me. Strip macheing anything is like my least favorite thing to do, but it's a necessary step in a lot of paper mache. So just make sure you get one full layer, cover the whole skull. You can do multiple layers with just the water, that's fine, but you only really need one layer. And again, as I get a little bit over these areas, down in here, I'm just going to cut my pieces just to make sure that I have that barrier, that release barrier from the strip mache that I will add using the paste. Next step is applying I'm going to do several layers of the strip mache with my newspaper strips, with just using the paste now. You don't need to, I like to put a couple of layers in there just to let them sit a little bit, but I'm applying them right over that water barrier of the strips that I've created. And on this, you're probably going to want, I would say, I would go at least 3 layers so that you have 4 layers, which is going to include that water layer barrier. Obviously, the more layers you put on here, the stronger your support is going to be when you go and cut this thing off after it dries. And then, you know, kind of reform it, glue it back together, and start applying your clay and sculpting. So I recommend at least 4 to 5 layers. And that will include, I'm including that water barrier layer there. And again, you know, when you get to some areas, you can cut your pieces so that you can form them better around those areas that have more of a protrusion from the bone on the skull. But that's what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to keep on carrying on here and laying on my layers of the strip mache. When it gets to a point in my strip mache, I have my first layer here. I just need to layer up on the side of the skull. It gets so goopy, and if you've had enough experience with paper mache, you'll understand this. But it gets so goopy that you get to a point where you don't even really need to add any more paste to your strips. I'm not even dipping these strips at this point in to the paste because it's so goopy. But once, you know, and then I'm running it through the paste, excess paste that has fallen off onto my piece of plastic here, just trying to absorb all of that kind of stuff. So you get to that kind of a point, you know, that's what I would recommend. Instead of applying more, dipping more strips, making a bigger mess, just go in and use this method. Now, some of you are probably saying, well, how do you know if you have, you know, the adequate amount of number of strip mache? How do you tell? Because then it all starts running together. Well, I tend to start on a certain area, so I'll start here and I'll build forward. I'll turn it around and I'll go all the way around and I'll flip it and I'll do the back and then I do the sides and then I repeat that process. So I know right now I have a complete layer of that water base layer and then my first layer of the paste. And I'm going to go ahead and do this at least maybe 2 or 3 more times. The reason that I like to use these smaller strips is because this is a smaller scale of an armature that I'm strip machining, and I just feel like I have a lot more control. Now, this is my least favorite part of paper mache. It gets, again, tedious, boring, whatever. And if I'm not filming, what I normally do is I'll put on, you know, a movie in the background, one that I really like and I've probably watched a million times, so I don't really need to pay attention and watch it, but I just have it playing in the background. Or put some music on or a podcast or whatever like that, and I find that the time goes by you know, a lot quicker. But that's just my point of view. And so just talking to you right now, you know, I'm pretty much on the point where I have maybe 1 more layer of strip mache to get on here before I call this done. And the other thing is when I'm making armatures for jack-o'-lanterns or anything like that, with the strip mache process, what I tend to do is I'll do a bunch of them at the same time. So I'm not, you know, I'll do like 5 or 6 of them, strip mache a bunch of the pumpkin forms, strip mache a bunch of whether it's balloons or garbage bags or plastic bags or whatever, and I'll get it all done at one shot so that, you know, I can get all that out of the way and move on, let them dry, and then begin the sculpture process, which is a lot more fun. Alright, so I ended up putting about 6 layers of strip mache onto my plastic skull here. That does include the water barrier strips. And I'm going to go ahead and put this in front of a fan and let this dry probably 24 hours, and it'll be good to go, and I can remove this from that plastic mold that's underneath there. The other thing that we did in this segment of the tutorial is we built our books here. At this point, if you really feel like you want to strip mache your books, go ahead, since you got your paste out, and you've already done your skull, go ahead and put a couple layers of strip mache on your books. It's not going to hurt any at all. I don't feel the need to do that, but if you do, then go ahead and do that now and let those sit out to dry. The other thing, and let me move out of the way for just a second, this sculpture right behind me, I call him the Pumpkin Reaper, and the skull on him was actually also created with using this plastic mold. So I've used this plastic mold again many times, and you can do the same, or you can do shortcuts, buy a foam skull, strip mache over that, and then there's no cutting, there's no removing, you're just going to use that whole foam skull and just clay over that, build up your features that way. I'm showing you how to do this sculpture step by step using paper-mâché materials and techniques, but there are definitely shortcuts to doing this. So anyway, that's going to be a conclusion for part 1 of our tutorial on how to make the skull and books sculpture. And as always, I thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one, where we will start our sculpting process and removing our paper mache from this skull. Catch you in the next one.